hits.
Yeah.
And now, which is funny, but now you kind of mention it and people are like, oh yeah, didn't so-and-so get inspired by that? I think Cabin in the Woods was kind of inspired by that, so I think you're seeing
now they have Cthulhu plushies.
Yeah, the Cthulhu plushies. Yeah, that's true. I forgot about that. And everything's Cthulhu. Yeah.
So he's gone very mainstream.
Very mainstream. Yes.
He's sold out. All right. So I guess we'll take this in a little more personal direction. Tell everybody about sort of your personal take on, what you do, horror, how you approach writing. Kind of it's a little bit of an open-ended question. I'm throwing a softball question for.
Well, I already mentioned that every time I try to write a story, it turns out with monsters in it. And I don't know why. I don't intend to do that. I actually am just fascinated, almost obsessed with time travel. And, it seems to be beyond me at this point. But as far as, I want to kind of comment on the writing process that I do, because I heard that in the first panel, and I heard some very, very different answers, and I have a feeling we might have more different answers. But I also want to kind of connect it to horror. So I've done the writing process in at least 2 very, very different ways in my life. I have done the get ideas, jot them down, and just draft until the story is done. And more recently, I've gotten a contract with a publisher that actually publishes on a regular basis. So every 5 weeks, I have another episode. Over the course of a year, I have a full-length novel. And I can't do that. It's like a modern version of serialized publishing. And that has forced me to change how I write, because I have to have a final product of episode 1 before I can even really get into episode 2. And as a process, sometimes in writing we hear about the idea of pantsers versus plotters. I write by the seat of my pants versus I plot things out, I plan ahead of time. I think my natural talent is a pantser. But this new publishing model has forced me to become a plotter, and it doesn't fit right. I'm always behind. I published episode 7 2 weeks ago. Episode 8 is due in 3 weeks. I haven't written a single word yet. And yes, I'm scared. Just, it's not like, it's no big deal. No, I'm freaking out right now because it's the end of the marking period. My grades are due. I haven't written a word yet this month. But what I have learned that does work is I've kind of found a way to merge the two, do them at the same time. I have a basic idea for the episode, and I will write the opening scene. And then I'll probably stop for the night. And when I come back to it the following day, because when I'm doing this, I will write every single day. And the first thing I will do is I will actually read and totally revise and edit yesterday's writing, which, number 1, it gets me back into the story, but number 2, I'm fixing things that were wrong. And I'll take some extra notes on the side. Oh, this is too big of a problem right now. I'll fix that later. But then immediately after doing those revisions, I will jump into drafting scene 2. And I've kind of created a working pattern of that. And for the most part, it's done very, very well for me. But as soon as I'm done this is the story in question. As soon as I'm done episode 10, I'm going back to the 3rd book of this trilogy, and it's self-published. And I will have all the time at my disposal. And I'm probably going to spend 2 or 3 months just drafting, because that's what I prefer to do. And I think the whole purpose of sharing the two-sided thing is that I never in my life would have thought that I could have been a plotter till I found out that I had to be, and it turns out that I could. And I think we all have different strengths and weaknesses, but we can write in different fashions if we have to. I never actually related it to horror, but that's all I have to say about that.
You have the horror of a looming deadline.
That is the most frightening thing in the world.
Yes,
that's a story unto itself.
The looming deadline.
Yes, every writer's worst fear.
So just to touch on writing style, I outlined a book once, and then it was done, and I had no interest in actually writing it. Obviously, none of you understand that. Nobody's laughing. So what I do is I kind of kick the ball rolling forward, and I put a flashlight on it, right? So I only see as far as 10 feet of the story, kind of like, when you're driving at night, right? and so I call it a roadmap, and I'll kind of, I hate using the word plot, but I'll say it anyway. I plot out a certain amount forward, and then I'll write it, and the characters decide that my plot sucks, and they do what they want, and then I have to replot from where they're going to. Kingdom of the Pearl Dawn, I set out with the idea of writing a story about this guy. He's an atheist. Well, he didn't start to be one, but he's an atheist, and a ghost confronts him. And he has no idea what to do with this. He thinks he's got this sort of brain death that's going on, and he's losing his mind. And he has to go to this city of ghosts. And all this came out of when I adopted our son. My wife and I went to China, and we adopted a 16-month-old. But the architecture, the history, and there was one day where we were out, and there was fog everywhere, and through the fog you could see like the skeleton of buildings. It just made me think of a city of ghosts that disappears and reappears. And that's how that came to be. So I sat down, that was done. I sat down, I was going to write a thriller, because I was like, I don't feel like writing horror. I'm just going to write a fun thriller. I'm going to do this so differently. I'm going to take 5 characters, and I'm going to write each chapter from their point of view, but I'm not going to do it in a linear fashion. So if I feel like working on the first 3 chapters of David, then I'll do that, and then I'll go back, and because they're all separate. There was a plane crash, and these 5 people survived, but they have no recollection of surviving, nor were they found at the crash. One was found in Vermont, one was found in Alabama, so they're scattered all over the place, and they come to realize there's a government agency trying to track them down. And I'm going along, and everything's fine, and the main character meets up with this woman, and she's got a suitcase with money in it, and under the money is a spell book because her ex-husband is trying to raise an ancient god. I'm like, what, wait. and all of a sudden, I'm like sitting beside myself with these 2 characters going, no spell books, no Cthulhu, no, we want to sell this thing. We can't have this. But she's like, no, this is going to be awesome. Watch. Zipper up the bag, put the money on top, put the guns on top of that, and let's go here. And that's that thing where the character decides, hey, look what I found, and it's just run with it and see what happens. Because the bottom line is, it's a first draft. And if at the end of the first draft, when I sync everything together, the spell book disappears, then I take the spell book out. It's the beauty of a first draft, is I don't have to adhere to anything. No one else is going to see it unless I want them to. And it allows for a great amount of freedom. I'm supposed to tie this in with something horror? No?
No, you've
okay.
tied it in.
Okay, so the only thing, the last thing
it's
I'm
kind of
your
say, process and why you write horror
okay.
and
I have
that.
no idea,
Yeah.
just oddly enough.
It just happens. Okay, so that's
I will leave this. 9/10 of my books, 9/10 of my story have some element of possession in it. I do not know why. Somebody is always possessed. I don't know why. It's very strange. Some days I just don't feel like myself, that's all.
So writing short stories obviously is very different from writing novels, and I've done both. I just haven't published the novels. But with novels, I've always been a pantser, which has led to problems because it's much harder sometimes to pull together once you do finish that first draft. If it's all over the place, sometimes it's harder to bring it in. I just read recently in preparation for NaNoWriMo this year about plantsers, which are planning pantsers. Planning pantsers.
I knew that would happen eventually.
Yeah, it's going to happen.
It was going to have to happen.
So it's kind of like easing me into plotting. Where for my Nano novel, where you have to do the 50,000 words in November, it wasn't so much, I didn't plot it out. I don't have it like scene by scene by scene. But what I did was, I have like a story idea, and then I have some major scenes I want to hit and to get to that end point. So it's not fully plotted, but I also have a good idea of what I want to be in there. So I've been able to kind of, plot out a little bit as far as, how do I want to get to that end? And it's helped a little bit. So maybe it's kind of easing me into being a plotter. But for me, writing, where I get, when I start writing, I'm very much into history. So, especially anything from about 400, 500 AD up to the early Middle Ages, or 1500, I should say, early modern period. There's a lot of inspiration in there. So, you know, a lot of my ideas come out of things that I've read in history books or something like that. Another thing a theme that kind of informs my writing is feminism. So sometimes I'm very much into writing stories that have a feminist twist to them. You know, just taking, like, for instance, the story of Medusa, and, you know, it was pissed me off about how she got screwed over majorly. So, you know, kind of just giving a feminist twist to that. So for me, horror is basically, you know, what am I afraid of? And then being able to take that and maybe tie it into something I've read recently that was really interesting, and then pulling it all together into either a short story or into something longer. You know, like I like cats, I like history, I like time travel. Somehow I pulled it all together into a book that I'm finishing up the second draft on. So,
Nice.
Yeah.
All right.